Good evening and welcome to this public workshop of the Board of Education of Anne Arundel County. I am Board President Robert Silkworth. Tonight, the board will learn more from Superintendent Dr. Mark Bedell and Anne Arundel County Public School staff on the recommendations for the fiscal 2025 operating and capital budgets. This workshop is open to the public. However, no public comment will be taken. The workshop is being broadcast live on AACPS TV, which can be found on Channel 96 on Comcast and Astound, and Channel 36 on Verizon. High definition broadcast can be seen on Channel 996 on Comcast, Channel 496 on Astound, and Channel 2136 on Verizon. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're excited today to have this opportunity to provide the board and the community with this budget workshop on the superintendent's recommended FY 2025 operating and capital budgets. We have a number of staff members here prepared to present, and I'll let them introduce themselves for the record. So let's get right into it.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. For the record, Matt Stansky, Chief Financial Officer.
Melissa Kamala, Senior Manager of Budget.
Bill Heiser, Chief Operating Officer.
Yep. And we're here today to give you an overview, deep dive of the fiscal 25 operating and capital budget request that was presented back in December. As we all know, the last 2 fiscal years have been fairly robust for Anne Arundel County Public Schools, and we've welcomed that funding both at the county, state, and federal level. But as signaled to the community and to the board many times that fiscal 25 is going to be a bit of a challenge. And I think although our budget, as we dive into it today, reflects still priorities that we have as a district, but it also reflects some of the challenges that we're going to face here in fiscal 25. The board is well aware of our chart here of the 12-step process. We do start this way back in September. That way I didn't mean it really. It is a 12-step process, but Ms. Frank, I mean, yeah. But yeah, so but we are on between step 7 and 8 right now, which was the superintendent proposed his budget to the board in December, and now we are here. It's with you all, the board, now to deliberate and to approve in February. All right, so what is in it from a revenue perspective? Overall, we're looking at $1.7 billion budget. We'll start on the unrestricted side. It's a slight change, a $50,000 increase in the federal revenue. This is the impact aid that Anne Arundel County Public Schools receives for having Fort Meade in the district. And so this is federal aid for to offset that revenue loss that the county has for not being able to collect property taxes on that large piece of property. State revenue, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on here. It's $15.6 million. I will tell you, the governor released his budget yesterday. And so we are, combing through it, but initial indications are positive. We believe at this point, don't quote me on it just yet, but we're looking at possibly $4 million more than the $15 million. So somewhere near $20 million. So that is good news for us. Obviously, we'd have liked it to be higher. But it is 20 million is better than 15. So, but we're getting more details hopefully tomorrow, and I'll be able to give a full detail to the board once we review that. But early indications are $4 million, but it's still a lot less than what we've received the last couple of years, which has been in the neighborhood of $50 to $60 million increases from the state. A couple of factors there. First, the legislation prescribes the increase in the foundational per pupil amount in the blueprint. Every year, that is typically in the 3% to 5% increase range, except for fiscal 25. It only contemplates a 1.7% increase in per pupil revenue. That is probably, if I had to ascertain or guess what that is related to, they probably needed a pause year to help make it more affordable. And so fiscal 25 was that year where the foundation just did not grow that much. The second big reason for us, and we'll get into it in the next couple slides, is last year we saw a 1,500 student increase in our enrollment growth. This year we are flat. And so obviously the blueprint rewards districts that are growing. we did not grow this year. And so we'll have to look to see how we can get students back, growing and get this district back growing again. But those are really the two main factors. Obviously, wealth continues to be a factor. We stayed relatively the same. I will say there's an anomaly with Calvert County, who had got some reassessments done, and their wealth really jumped high to the point where they became wealthier than us. They have some commercial utility properties there that had a pilot that expired, and so now that became accessible tax base and really jumped their wealth, which has severely impacted their revenue. So my thoughts go out to them as they try to deal with that. So that's where we are on the state revenue piece. We'll go into a little more detail on that. On the county revenue side, we're at $80.3 billion or $1 million increase over last year. So just $961.8 million. And so we'll talk more about why that is, but it's in line with what we've asked in prior years of the county government. You heard Mr. Trumbauer kind of give an overview of where the county government is and where they project to be. Obviously, it looks healthy on the income tax side and the property tax side, not so healthy on the transactions, right? The real estate transaction revenues are short. So I think we can probably not expect 80 million, but I think we can make a good argument for everything that we're asking for. And that's, really the goal here. On the local revenue side, we're at $2.4 million increase. This is directly related to interest income increasing, right? Interest rates, while going down slightly, are still high. And we are collecting more cash returns on our deposits than we normally do. So that is just a reflection of that. So all in on the unrestricted side, $1.5 billion and $98.4 million increase. On the restricted side, no surprise, right? So restricted grants, this is this expiration of all of our COVID-related grants, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. $40.8 million decrease in our restricted grants. This gets us back to what we would say normal for our federal grants. $3.5 million increase in our internal service fund for healthcare. This is the employee portion of contributions to the self-insurance fund. And then no increase in revenues for projecting flat growth here in the food service fund. So restricted grants, or restricted budget down $37.2 million overall, gets us to a total of $61.2 million, that 3.7% increase over last year. This just really is the pie chart that breaks it down, just to remind folks that because Anne Arundel County is considered a wealthier county as compared to our peers around the state, and so the majority of our revenue comes from the county government as prescribed by this funding formulas in the state. So 56.2% we're projecting coming from the county, 31.9% from the state. That federal number during the last few years was up around 5-6%. It's now back down to the 3.9% that we typically see. 4.8% in local and fund balance, and then the food service fund at 3.2%. All right, I thought it was appropriate for us to kind of reflect back, since fiscal 25 is the expiration of our COVID grants, to reflect back that we've had really from fiscal 21 to fiscal 25, overall $218.4 million worth of COVID-related grants over those 5 years. That is a large amount of money. However, I did want to point out, though, that because it was spread out over 5 years, it really only equates to about $520 per student. So while that was funding that was needed and used well, I think it's important to reflect that because that funding was spread out over those multiple years, it really wasn't that huge amount jolt of funding that I think some people were portraying it to be, right? It was nice to have. It helped us get through the pandemic. It helped us change some things. But at the end of the day, it was roughly only about $520 per student. But you could see up here on the screen all the different grants that we received over that 5-year span and what we used it for. And I want to focus a little bit on what we used it for, right? We've talked about retention bonuses we paid last year that helped pay for that, not only for those, but we paid separate retention bonuses for special education employees. Obviously, the tutoring programs that we have stood up, the massive amount of mental health supports that we've done over the last 5 fiscal years. Obviously, we know about the virtual academy, which we've already transferred over to the general fund. So that was something new that we've done. The summer programming, happy to report that we'll be able to do one more summer of enhanced summer programming with ESSER dollars. So we didn't have to build that into the general fund, but that may be something that we'll see in fiscal 26. Obviously, all the technological enhancements we were able to do. We were able to increase pay for extracurricular activities for our employees. We are able to invest in the science of reading and social emotional support. We had grow your own initiatives, and we were able to actually also replace a number of HVAC equipment in our schools as well. So I think we are able to use the money well. We invested it wisely, but I think it was just a good opportunity for us to sort of kind of look back and see what we've done with it as this era comes to an end. All right, so we talked about state aid and the drivers. I think it's important to note the data points that go in. So these are data points that actually go in to the state funding formulas and the county funding formulas. And so you can see here, this is from last year to this year. Again, total enrollment stayed relatively flat, down 104 students. Maintenance of, that's pre-K through 12. Maintenance of effort enrollment backs out pre-K, so K through 12. So we're down 168.75 students there. We did see a reduction in students who qualify for farms. This is, for the most part, our applications were down slightly. So we're down 1,668 students there. But where did we grow? Our English learner population continues to grow, 6.7% for this school year. Special education population continues to grow, 4.9%. Special education students who qualify for transportation at 9%. And then obviously continuing to expand that full day pre-K, 14.4% increase there as well. But I also thought it was important to talk about, again, where we were right before the pandemic to where we are now. You hear Dr. Bedell talk a lot about a sense of belonging, right? And that every student who walks into our buildings should feel like they belong in those buildings. I'm here to tell you Anne Arundel County is growing more diverse, and it's growing diverse very rapidly. You can see from the 1920 school year to where we are now, our enrollment stay relatively flat, down slightly, 0.76%. Our maintenance of effort enrollment down a little bit more, near 1%. But let's look at these other populations. Our farms population has grown 26% over that time span. Our English learner population has grown 28.5% in that time span. Special ed population has grown 12.25% in that time span. Special education transportation 3.7, and then obviously again the push the full day pre-K. Look at the progress we've made here. Almost a 79% increase in the number of full day pre-K students, and more to come. So while we have the same total number of students roughly, the makeup of that student population has changed immensely over these last 5 years. And so I think it's important to emphasize again that our student demographics are changing, and it's incumbent upon us to make sure that every student that walks into those buildings feels like they belong in those buildings. Where are we per pupil revenue wise? So this is a chart we show every year. It gives you a 10-year comparison. Back in the 2012, 2013 school year, we are about 14th in the state in the per pupil revenue. As you can see, in the latest available data provided by the Department of Legislative Services, we are currently sitting 15th in the state, $16,784 per student. This is, again, last school year's data. We're hoping to get this school year's. Usually comes out in February. The state average is $17,922, but I think it's important to note the districts that we're really competing with for employees are all, for the most part, above us. Baltimore County, there's Charles, there's Calvert, Prince George's, Montgomery, Howard, Baltimore City. If you look at Howard County, they're a little over 2,000 more per student than we are. If you multiply that 2,000 by our student population, our budget would grow by $178 million. So imagine what your superintendent could do with $178 million more dollars, right? It would be amazing. But that's not our reality. So that our reality is that, right? And so I think Dr. Bedell's directive, this board's directive, this county's directive is to, for every dollar we have, to be strategic, thoughtful, and invest it wisely, because we don't have it to waste. We're competing against folks that have $1,500, $2,000 more per student than we have. And so we have to really make sure that what we're doing with our money is investing it wisely and getting the best for our children. And so I think it's always important to point this out because we get compared a lot, and it's not an excuse of why we can't do certain things versus other districts, but it is a reality that we have to face. And so I think it's always important to just let the board and the community know where we stand amongst our peers. Again, we talked about the per pupil funding and the foundation. This just gives you a good look of where we've been, both in Bridge to Excellence and now over with Blueprint. You can see, obviously, during the Great Recession, that 6,694 stayed there for 5 years. Right. So yeah, those were tough times too. And then you could see it slowly, creeping up, especially during the time of low CPI. It still didn't grow that much. And then obviously you can see when the Blueprint really started kicking in, fiscal 21, you can see from 21 to 22, significant growth, and then continued significant growth. But again, from 24 to 25, we're not seeing that growth that we typically see. It kicks back in again in fiscal 26 at a 4% clip, but for fiscal 25, it is 1.7%. Where is that money going? As we always say, education is a people business. And so a vast majority of our money, nearly 80%, is going to salaries, wages, and benefits of our hardworking employees. And again, happy to report that 88% of that personnel cost of that 80% is directly related to school-based personnel and instructional personnel. The rest of our pie chart is transportation, 4.5%, our utility costs at 2.1%, our non-public tuition, which is for students who have IEPs that we cannot service here, that we send out to private schools, and then 11.4% for variable costs, which are listed on the slide. All right, so with the new money that we're asking for, where do we want it to go? As you can see here, the vast majority of it, again, is in compensation, both salaries and benefits for our employees. We do have larger than normal, I'd say, contractual obligation and commitment line of 19.5, which we'll get into. We have Blueprint mandates of 5.7 million. The ESSER funding cliff items of 7.5, and then enhancements for student achievement at 5.1. I think it's important to note here that there's a lot of mandates coming, either through contractual obligations of our choosing and through mandates. And so it's going to be part of the challenge this year is those numbers are just higher than normal, and we're going to have to work through those to still try and meet our other needs when possible. And then obviously on the restricted side, the grant fund reduction matches the revenue reductions there. So all in, again, 61.2 million. So we're going to take now a deep dive into those categories. So on the compensation increases, the 60.4 million is broken down into two sections. First is a compensation placeholder of 43.5 million. This is the equivalent of one step increase for all eligible employees and a 3% COLA for all employees in the district. And then we've talked a lot about the healthcare fund and where it is and how healthy or not healthy it is. But we believe we're at this point, we need a $17 million program enhancement here to continue to be able to pay our obligations and to keep that fund balance in the healthcare fund healthy. So all in $60.5 million for employee compensation. On to commitments. We have nearly $14 million in new schools. So we'll start with Severn One High School, $9.6 million. This includes funding for positions necessary to open that school 9 through 12. Again, we were unable to do a phased-in opening for this school just due to the transportation logistical challenges that would encounter. So we're opening it 9 through 12, but because of that, we are needing to fully fund that school with the staff necessary to have it up and running. So $9.6 million there. Opening pre-K through 5, Two Rivers Elementary School at $2.9 million. Again, opening it fully operational in year 1 and So this is the staff and materials necessary to get that school open. We have also authorized the opening of a new charter high school here in Annapolis, the new Village Academy charter. So we're looking at $3 million based on the charter school funding formula, obviously making estimates on the student population. Well, that'll obviously get reconciled once actual students begin enrolling, but that is slightly over $3 million for that school to open up. And then we do have existing charters and contract schools. So you see a reduction here. This is directly related to Monarch Annapolis. They're currently budgeted at 790 students. They have only been servicing about 475 to 500. They're looking to keep that enrollment around 475 to 500, even though they're authorized at the 790. And so we are just making a budget adjustment to reflect that reality that they are only going to be servicing roughly 500 students moving forward. So that is an actual savings there. Two more, we have our non-public tuition, both the tuition rate and the number of students entering non-public continues to grow. And so projecting to need $1.3 million to meet those obligations moving forward for next year. And then obviously we've made tremendous progress in transportation and recruiting and retaining bus drivers under the leadership of Dr. Heiser. And so we are looking at $4.3 million in obligations to our contracted transportation vendors to continue to make inroads in compensating those hardworking employees. On to blueprint mandates. Total of $5.7 million, but we're looking at $7.8 million increase in our community school program. We currently have 23 community schools. We'll get more details next week, but we're projecting right now to add another 13 to get us to 36 community schools. We're now at the legislative mandated threshold of school has to have an 3-year average of 55% or higher farms rate in order to qualify. And so given that calculation, we believe there'll be 36 community schools in AACPS for next school year. I think we've seen great programming and great things coming out of that program under Dr. P's leadership, and looking forward to adding more to the complement. This is now going to be a bigger program than our Title I program, and so it is quickly growing, and so we'll manage it and help those schools get up and running. A reduction of $2.2 million in the transitional supplemental instruction program. So this is the K through 3 tutoring that the blueprint contemplated when first passed. The idea was this would ramp up, which it has, up till fiscal 24, which was its peak, and now the legislation contemplates it ramping down, and so this is the first year of the ramp down of that, and so $2.2 million reduction in this number. I told you some good news about the state budget. I'm about to probably tell you some not so good news. So on the college and career readiness front, we were projecting a small increase of $59,000. Every district statewide is going to see a cut here. We've gone back and forth on the methodology. The methodology to calculate the revenue is still scores on MCAP. And so given the scores on MCAP, every district is going to see a reduction here. And so I'll bring you more details, but that $59,000 number is not going to stay put there. That's going to go down. So we're going to see a reduction there. That one will hit hard. It's the money we use to pay for the community college tuition, the AP testing, the IB testing, the CTE, completer programs as well. So more to come on that, but that's early indication of where we are with that right now. This next one is just a small increase in our workforce development partnership. The Workforce Development Board provides career counseling, career coaching in grades 6 through 12 per the blueprint. It's a mandate, and so this is just the mandated increase that we're calculating for that program for next school year. All right, on to the ESSER funding cliff. We talked through at length about a lot of items, but we've presented 3 before you here today for funding consideration to move into the general fund. Starting with class coverage, this was something that was instituted during the pandemic because of the high vacancy rates. We were asking our workforce to cover multiple classes, losing their planning time, and so through negotiations, we agreed to pay teachers for that lost planning time, for that coverage, essentially. Right now, the rate is $60 per coverage. Through negotiation, that rate will move down to $30, but it was all covered with ESSER dollars, and so we're going to need to move $2.2 million over to the general fund to meet those obligations. On the technology front, we were pre-pandemic mostly a desktop district, believe it or not. We obviously quickly had to move our employees to mobile devices, and so we had to enter into agreements to get all of our Unit 1 and Unit 4 employees mobile devices. And so this is $3.3 million to continue to meet those obligations, so those employees continue to have their mobile devices. And then on instructional technology front, it's about $2.1 million for essentially software we believe necessary to keep the district operational. We have things in here like Google Voice that was instituted during the pandemic. That's really a great tool that teachers use to communicate with families. The Google Suite is amongst in here as well, that teachers use often to make lessons and things of that nature. And our LMS dollars are currently in here as well. We talked about this yesterday. The district was mandated to have an LMS. We did not have funding in the general fund for an LMS. And so we now, we had to use ESSER dollars to pay for that LMS, and now we have to move those dollars over to the general fund. So $2.1 million there. All right, on to our program enhancements. This board, through vote, asked for 2 constituent service liaisons, one for general constituent concerns and one for specifically special education concerns. And so those 2 positions and the dollars associated with those positions are reflected in the proposal before you today. We are asking for an additional 3 teachers and 3 teaching assistants to open 3 new pre-kindergarten classrooms for next school year. This is a little bit lower than what our typical expansion is, but given the other priorities in the district, we still feel like the need is there to at least do 3. I would imagine that this one will come back next year and the year after that as the blueprint mandates continue to grow. On the English language development front, again, you saw this, the growth we had this past school year and the growth we've had over the last 5 years. And so this is 7 teaching positions and $607,000 to provide services to those students. On the school support front, we have 4 proposals in front today. First is licenses to begin to expand Avid into our elementary schools. It's a very successful program in our high schools and our middle schools, and looking for $119,000 to begin to expand that program into our elementary schools. One of the smaller grants we received from the state was competitive, that we were awarded, that was used with state ESSER dollars, was the Maryland Works grant. Obviously that expires, but this is really to help jumpstart our apprenticeship program. And so we want to continue that work. So it's to fund 2 positions and $483,000 in the Career and Technical Education office. Middle school athletics, we're looking to expand our athletic program into middle schools. Dr. Bedell and his visits with middle schools, this was #1 on the list for those middle school students to get middle school athletics up and running. And so he wanted to.
And food was number 2.
And what was number 2?
Better food.
Better food. Okay, well.
And I was there at Lindale, and when he mentioned the athletic programs, the applause was amazing.
There you go. All right. So this is a 2-year plan to fully phase it in. This is the cost to get that up and running, $682,000. It'll get 1.5 positions And the first season would kick off in the spring of 25. And so obviously looking forward to this. There's obviously a community benefit to this. Middle school student. I have 2 middle school students myself, and always looking for stuff to do after school to keep them out of trouble. And so this is another option for them. Awesome. And then finally, we instituted right away during the pandemic this virtual tutoring and homework help. I think it's met with rousing success. We have a grant that expires next December, so we're going to fund it through December. So this $300,000 would get us through essentially the second semester of next school year. So we are asking so we can continue that program as well. On the human resources front, obviously the pool of applicants continues to shrink nationwide for teachers, and so we need to really be aggressive. And so the HR team did a really nice job under Mrs. Kutch's leadership of looking within their own resources to identify and redirect money to create another recruiter position. So this is just to authorize the FTE. The dollars came from within the human resources budget. And so no dollar value here, just need the FTE authorization. Special education, $1.3 million. And this is in 2 spots versus the comprehensive programs. Again, Dr. Bedell's talked a lot about reducing workload. And these IEP clerks that we're asking for here do just that, right? They reduce the paper workload for the special education teachers so they can really focus on their students and instruction and leave the compliance piece to these IEP clerks. And so this is, we're asking for positions there as well as transition technicians. And then in the birth of 5 office, we're looking for 1 community-based service teacher. And then we're also in the Office of Special Services asking for 5 occupational therapist positions. Transportation, obviously great program we instituted with the alternative vehicles. We're just looking to round that out this year with 4 drivers, 4 technicians, and a mechanic to get that fully, to get our in-house program fully funded. And so $553,000 and $800 to fully fund that program as well. All right. I'm going to take a break for a second, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Heiser, who will walk you through the capital budget proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Stansky. And again, we have a couple of brief slides here that'll go over the FY 2025 capital budget. And this was reviewed in the meeting on September the 20th. So it's an overview of that information. The capital budget will total $234.5 million. Across 2 categories that you see there, major capital projects and recurring projects. Under the major capital projects, which will total $172.3 million, you see the design and planning for the school bus facility lot additions, Cat North facility construction, Old Mill North Middle School North construction, and Old Mill High School construction. Under recurring projects, I will spare you from reading all of that list. You have that list in front of you, but those recurring projects are ever so needed. And again, that totals $62.1 million across all those areas that you see, all important to the success and investment that we want to make in our facilities. In terms of anticipated project support from the Interagency Commission on School Construction, known as the IAC, and Built to Learn funding, BTL, total support we anticipate at $78.4 million. And again, across those 2 areas in blue, 34.8 from the IAC $1 million, and from the BLT, $43.6 million. Falling into the 2 categories that you see listed, under local planning and construction, you see 3 areas of construction we anticipate support for. Cat North construction at $16.4 million, Park Elementary School construction at $2.1 million, and Old Mill High School construction at $43.6 million. And again, that'll be captured under the Built to Learn funding. Under systemic projects, you see 2 projects listed, Lindale Middle School the HVAC program, which I know has been front and center on everyone's mind and list, for $12.7 million, and Glen Burnie High School, building enclosure, windows, and roof for $3.3 million. And again, that request will be addressed by the IAC. We anticipate that in May of 24. Thank you.
All right. So what are our issues? I've walked through a lot of them, but I think it bears repeating. Again, funding requirements from the blueprint of Maryland's future in a year where we're having limited revenue growth, right? So putting increased pressures on us. Employee compensation and benefits can always is a pressure because we want to stay competitive. We want to reward our hardworking employees, but a step increase is $16.7 million, right? So it's significant funding that we need to invest, but it is, again, in a time of limited revenue growth, can be difficult. Obviously, our ability to continue existing programs currently funded with federal ESSER and ARP grant dollars, right? We're not able to do that. We are maximizing what we can while the grant dollars are still available, but we've already had to make some difficult choices, and I think further difficult choices are going to be coming as well. And obviously, we're opening 3 new schools, 2 high schools and an elementary school in 1 year. That is not something that we normally do. And so because of that, it is putting extreme budgetary pressures on the district and is limiting, I think, and will limit our ability to do other things. Opening new schools are great, and I think it's worthwhile, and it would be great for those kids, but it's going to come at a cost, and that is some other things that we want to do for next school year. But that's where we are. These are important dates. Remember, we have a hearing, the rescheduled hearing from the rain out, I guess, right? January 25th. Sorry, baseball guy. Yeah. At Old Mill High School at 6:00. And then this board will deliberate and vote on the request on February 21st, which will then go to the county executive March 1st. He will have 2 months of deliberation and will present his budget on May the 1st. And we'll let the public and the board know when those public hearings will be. And then the deadline, the county charter deadline for the council to vote is June 15th. And then we will have our vote on the 18th. And July 1st, we'll be ready to go. I want to thank you all for the time, as always, and ready to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. I think on behalf of my colleagues, I have to say, Mr. Sandy, you are amazing. You all agree? You're absolutely, well, not just you, the entire staff. So we'd like to thank you for that. Now, my intention tonight was to go roll call order. So I think we'll do that. So, Ms. Frank, you are first this evening.
So it's a no to roll call. Okay, I do have a couple questions, and one of them I think you answered in one of the slides. Okay, so you said that we had flat growth. If you look at our full day pre-K, we're at 1,904 students. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when we talk about flat growth, without those students, what would our growth have been just from last year if we took out the pre-K?
Oh, yeah. So if you just look at the MOE enrollment,
Okay,
that backs out pre-K.
got it. Okay,
Yeah. So we're at 168.75. That MOE enrollment backs out other things too. But that for the most part, total enrollment and MOE enrollment, the difference is the pre-K.
and then how many students would that have been? 84,500-ish? Without the pre-K students enrolling, how many students would it have been total in the system?
Oh, it's that 81,742.
81,000. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Great. Okay. And then also with the growth that we had, specifically with the farms students, and was the change in the farm students new students coming in and out, or was it a change in familial situation? Do you know? Do you know what the cause of that is?
So I think it's a couple things. I think economy's gotten better, right? So I think that's part of it. Part of it is Medicaid had different, I'll say different rules for enrolling during the pandemic. Those rules expired. Last year was the first year Maryland used Medicaid as a direct certification method. And so I think some families, especially middle and high school, who tend to not fill out the forms, captured those students a year ago and did not capture them this year. But I think not that we were over prescribed last year. I just think it was the first year back and people were kind of like filled out the forms. We had the new certifications. Obviously, we lost some students from last year to this year. That could be a factor, but it surprised me. But it was really, there were some direct certification issues, but it was really just not as many forms being filled out.
Okay.
And so I think we'll circle. Miss Rissy does a great job of getting the word out, and our principals do too. And I think what'll be fascinating is as the blueprint money following the student ramps up, there's actually now an incentive, a real incentive for principals to get those students who qualify to actually qualify, because there's now money going to be attached for their school.
Yep, absolutely.
And so, I think on the one hand, you don't want to see it grow because that means there's poverty in your community.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, you're happy with it going down, but I think what we all want is just, if your family qualifies, we need you to qualify so you can get that free breakfast and lunch. And so that's really the real reason. The state is looking at a different poverty indicator than, the farms form is never intended to really determine poverty of a community. It was a mechanism to get students breakfast and lunch.
Yeah.
And so I know MSD is looking at alternative methods. I think those have been probably too costly, to be quite frank. In the methodologies they're picking are identifying more students, and hence it's hitting it would hit the state budget really hard. And so I don't think it's really moved anywhere, but I think the K-12 community writ large is trying to grapple with what is the true measure of poverty, because and this has really been the only method that districts have ever used. And if you talk to anybody at the United States Department of Agriculture who set the program up, they would tell you this was never meant to be an indicator of poverty. But it's what we have right now, and there's a lot of money tied to it. So
yeah, I mean, it is an indicator of poverty.
It is.
But to your point, it may not necessarily be intended to be the only indicator of poverty. So I appreciate that.
Yep.
I absolutely want to say thank you to Mrs. Kuchas for reallocating your budget so carefully. So that was great to hear. And then the only other question that I have, and I've mentioned this, and maybe you have this number, maybe you don't, but 79.8% of our budget is salaries. How much of that is Unit 1? Do you know?
Not off the top of my head, but we'll get it for you.
I would love to have that.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, Dr. Tobin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And yes, as always, thank you everyone for the work that goes into this. This is a terrific briefing and an extraordinary piece of work. So I have a couple of questions. The money that is showing up from the federal government, $50K with regard to Fort Meade.
Mm-hmm.
Am I speaking of forms that have to be filled out? Does that come out of that form that families are asked to fill out?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
because
That
that's another one that's under.
It is. And we've moved to digital, electronic, so we no longer have the paper forms.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
yes, you have to fill out whether you work on the base or work for the federal government near the base, your address. Yes, and our participation rate is not where it needs to be.
Yeah, because my sense was always that we were essentially losing money there. So, yeah, hopefully we keep working on that. The chart you give us, which I always find very helpful, the per pupil revenue chart. So we've moved down to 15. You mentioned that Anne Arundel County is considered a wealthier county. I'm assuming, I take it, we are a wealthier county. Do you have any sense of where we rank in terms of wealth among the counties?
Yeah. So from an education funding standpoint, Dr. Tobin, wealth is measured by your property tax assessable base, both personal and residential, as well as your income tax base divided by the number of students you have in the district. So it's a per pupil revenue or per pupil wealth indicator. We have been fifth, I believe now, given the situation in Calvert County, we're now down to sixth, but 6 out of 24, right?
Okay.
So we are, and I think I've talked to this board before, because of that calculation, we're actually considered wealthier than Howard County.
Yeah.
So Howard County actually gets more per pupil revenue from the state than Anne Arundel County does.
And just to be clear, when you say students in the district, you mean students who are enrolled in the
Correct.
public school system?
Correct, not total student.
So what's hurting us, I believe, is that we have private schools.
Absolutely.
Right? Because it's, I mean, I'll say, again, it's striking to me that if we're sixth in wealth and we're 15th in what we're spending, I mean, it's revenue, I understand, but it's that turns around as expense. That tells me we're not prioritizing our children's education. But beyond, and that's not us. That's the way the county is working. And part of what's working against us is, one could argue, by underfunding, in that sense, our public schools, we are incentivizing private schools and therefore putting ourselves in a worse financial position. So I just thought I would put that out there. And again, I'll say one more time, Dr. Bedell heard me say versions of this many times. We are the sixth, we think, wealthiest county in the state, and we are 15th in what we're spending per pupil. So I think there's a real gap there.
I think it's important to know, Dr. Tobin, wealth is measured on capacity or ability to pay. So it does not take into consideration tax caps, right? And so it is just the state's interpretation of a local jurisdiction's ability or capacity to fund their school district.
Well, it's another way of thinking about that for me is it's the money we have.
Mhm.
The question is, what do we choose to do with it?
Mhm.
And what I'm saying is, it seems clear to me from that we do not choose to prioritize our children. So that's just my statement. And I think I want to thank you for the answers we received to many questions that were sent in earlier via email, because I think for now that takes care of my questions. And I really, the answers that came back were very, very helpful. So thank you very much.
Ms. Schauheit.
Yes, Dr. Tobin's stealing my thunder. I want to dive a little deeper onto the per pupil spending, because since I've been on the board, it's been painful relative to our nearby counterparts locally. So if you can give us sort of, and this might be a little repetitive, but I think it's worthy considering the public watching, considering what we're up against this year. Just a little history on how we got here, if you can, in terms of being under state average since I started on the board, and are trending worse, not better, in this way.
Yeah, I mean, so we, we're right. According to this chart, we were 14th 10 years ago, now 15th. We are a a revenue constrained county per the charter, right? Per the county charter, right? There is a property tax cap. Now, there's mechanisms to go over that cap that the legislature passed probably 7 or 8 years ago that I believe our current administration has used that authority twice now to go above the property tax cap to fund the school system. The state contemplates or allows local governments to piggyback the income tax up to 3.2%. There are probably 2/3 of the local jurisdictions who are at the maximum of 3.2. We are not one of them. That has gone up under this administration though as well, but I think we're at 2.9 maybe now. So we're still not at the cap again, but those are county council, county executive choices. But the number one issue is that revenue constraint that we face both from the county charter, which was voter imposed, right? So that's a voter imposed cap, and we still have the income tax gap between other jurisdictions that we're competing against as well. And so because of that, we're not, again, that's why I kind of emphasize the ability or capacity to pay versus what we actually pay, because there are a lot of jurisdictions above us that majority of their money is coming from the state, right? So, Somerset, Worcester, Baltimore City, and with the blueprint, it's really ramping up for them, and it's ramped up for us too, but we're playing catch up from years and years of, during those, I showed those, that chart there. So this is the foundation that was flat for a decade. That's state funding. There, on top of that, we are getting maintenance of effort, right?
Effort
And
from
if
previous county executives.
and if you talk
Yeah.
to, sometimes we were fighting to just even get maintenance of effort, right? And so, yeah, we're playing catch up right now. And so, I think you hear it when Dr. Bedell got here and looked at the compensation gaps, right? I believe the term embarrassing was used multiple times, and we looked to address that last year. And again, I feel comfortable saying we wanted to address it more than what we could in the fiscal 25 budget. But given, again, the revenue constraints that we were facing on top of the mandates, new schools opening, blueprint mandates, the funding cliff coming to an end, I think we did really good work to put a step and 3% in, to be honest with you. I mean, completely transparent, given all those other constraints. And it's going to be a lot of hard work to keep it, right? I mean, we're asking for the county for $80 million. And so we're going to have to make some tough choices are going to have to be made here in the spring. But I think we still have put together a very responsible plan that moves this district forward. We couldn't do everything that we wanted to do, clearly, but we're trying to catch up. But it's this is years of maintenance of effort budgets and lack of state funding because we were considered wealthy. So we're not going to catch up overnight.
No, I get it. And there's, absolutely no shade thrown y'all's way. And there never has been. We as a county reap what we sow. And if we want to champion mediocrity, as we've done for, decades, then this is the direct result. So, when we talk about being all in it together to cure other things like violence and addiction problems and all of it, well, we're all in it together as a community to properly fund our schools, our public schools, so that we can be in the top 5 and the top 6 where we belong. Mm-hmm. So that's just me on my soapbox, because I see this chart every year and it makes me sick every year. And it's not y'all.
Yeah.
It's none of us in this room, but the decisions made politically before to kneecap AACPS have resulted in that position. So I thank you for your explanation. I missed on one page just a real super quick question. Transportation. You said it was one mechanic 4 drivers and 4 aides?
Correct.
Okay. Drivers, 4 aides. All right, just rolling through real super quick. I thought I dog-eared one more page. Just bear with me here. I did. Why did I do that? Oh yes, the $59,000 college and career readiness that you said will be less because of MCAP scores, but then it'll turn around and directly adversely affect AP, IB.
Yep.
There was like a list of
Yeah,
people, list
so-
of things that it would
Yeah,
affect.
so the Blueprint, one of the programs is the College Career Readiness Program. We get funding per college and career ready identified student. So the state board right now is contemplating new measures for students who are deemed college and career ready. Currently, per the Blueprint law, to obtain revenue, that measure is strictly based on MCAP scores. So if you score a 3 or a 4 in your high school math and high school ELA test, you are in the minds of the revenue generated CCR identified. Because of the fluctuation of the tests or when they were issued during the pandemic and the delay in getting the data, which we talked about yesterday
Yeah.
too, right? Up until this point, MSDE was using 2019 MCAP scores as a proxy to fund the CCR revenue.
Okay.
We now have spring of 2023 MCAP scores, which are now used to fund the fiscal 25 CCR budget. Those scores have, quite frankly, just aren't as good statewide as they were pre-pandemic. And so you're seeing, I think, offhand, about statewide, about an $8 million reduction in this program.
It just
And
seems like it
so-
just seems like a punitive measure because of what it then therefore funds.
Right.
Like
Correct. Now, depending on what the state board ultimately votes on as a new measure, could be grade point average is what I think is being contemplated. For fiscal 26, we could see a ramp back up of the revenue.
so $59,000 in a 1 point whatever billion dollar budget is like I dropped a few pennies on
So
the
yeah, so again,
sidewalk.
that's just the increase in the total program. The total program's probably 4 million.
Oh,
in
so
ra-
that's
in
the,
that
yeah, the
range.
increase. So
Yeah.
for that increase to not hurt our students and what these things then therefore cover, is this something that we would then shake a couch cushion or tap a fund balance to
Yeah, we'll
cover
have
for this year so that we don't mess our students about for something that's
Well, the
kind of not their fault?
the issue we're going to run into is the law mandates we cover anybody who's CCR ready, regardless of your revenue or not.
Right.
So it covers your AP class, your IB class. We have made a choice as a district, and I think the correct choice, to cover all students,
Absolutely.
whether you're CCR or not.
100%.
That's where the rubber's going to meet the road here. Like, can we, even with this cut, still offer the students who are non-CCR that barrier-free entry? I
Wow.
think that's going to be our goal, right? That's going to be our goal.
Way to go,
But
decision
we'll have
makers.
to. We're going to have to work through it.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I know I know Pazam, Mabe, this is going to be part of advocacy to have a hold harmless for this program for 1 year.
For sure. Yeah.
State budget's tight though, so that's going to be the challenge.
But then, the budget is also a statement of values. So like, I just think, again, messing our students about for something that's not entirely their fault given pandemic is the wrong way to look at this. If statements of a budget is a statement of values, I just ask them to reassess theirs with regard to this program. Sorry, I'm being blunt, but it's the night for that. Yeah, not sorry. I really thank you and your staff. A lot of work goes into doing this, to being here for us, for the public watching. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Mr. Lynn.
Thank you. So I just had one question for school support. So I noticed, obviously, that virtual tutoring and virtual homework help was for 300,000. So I was just wondering if there are actually, a significant or a large enough number of students utilizing this tool that it's worth continuing to fund. Just given like the fact that like a lot of students that I talk to may not know, either don't know about this, which I know, in recent years, there have been more efforts to promote it to students, either don't know about it or don't utilize it. So I was just wondering if there are enough students that are utilizing this to want to.
Great question. I don't have the utilization data in front of me, Mr. Lynn, so we will circle back in writing to you with that data. And make sure the full board has the response to that as well.
Michelle.
Just some anecdotal evidence about the greatness that is the virtual tutoring and the homework help. Like this has stopped like family fights at dinner tables over math problems. You know what I'm saying? In like my neighborhood for years now. So I think that they're worthy. I do. This is one of the things that, sorry, just try not to laugh. It's true. You have a middle schooler who thinks they know everything. You have a parent who knows math better than the middle schooler. They go to blows. It's bad. So I think this is one of the great programs, the silver lining, if you will, that came out of the pandemic and came out of the ESSER funds for me. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. So I may have a few things. I do want to thank everyone for the responses to the questions that the board had put forth. That was marvelous, and I'm greatly appreciative of that. I do want to make a statement or two about remind everyone about a few things. Some comments that I think originally came from Dr. Bedell, in which he said budgets must be built on reality. The days of school systems being flush with funds are over. We must build new boxes. We can't no longer just think or even work outside that proverbial box. We must build new boxes as we innovatively confront the difficult challenges that we have been hearing that we know we're going to have. None of this is easy. And a comment that resonates is everybody can't get everything they want. Having said that, I wish that I could get everything that I want for our kids. That also translates if for our teachers and our staff, if we get what we need for them, that translates into a pathway to success for our kids. So, having said that, I remember the days that were very lean. I was at the top of the scale. I didn't get steps, and we didn't get COLAs. And so it is absolutely true that I think this county could have done a better job. But I'm going to say, as I've said before, I feel for me, Anne Arundel County did very well by me as a teacher. But having said that, I want to make sure that we do very well for our kids and our teachers. So I have a few questions. I don't really need answers tonight because I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but just a few things. One of the questions dealt with robotics, and I wondered how many schools actually have robotics clubs similar to the club at one of our middle schools. As I remember looking at the budget, I think I saw a figure of $25,000 total budget with the potential for an additional $50,000. But I know that the one school that I'm thinking of, they have a budget which is $25,000. And so again, I don't need it now.
Yeah, so I think what we can do is, so every middle and high school has a robotics club.
Oh,
I think
all
that
of them. Okay.
I think the differentiation is which club. There are 5 to 6 different types of robotics clubs. Some are competitive. Some are just you meet twice a week and you build a robot, right? And so what we can do is, I think, give the board a description of each robotics club,
That
what
would be
it
great.
entails, who is, and then which schools are offering what. Because the cost can vary greatly depending on which club is chosen. Sometimes it's chosen just based on student demand, right?
Right.
And so we can provide that for the board, and so you have that information.
Okay, very good. And so I noticed under technology, instructional technology, the $2 million covers Google Voice,
Does.
which is very beneficial. It also covers Google Suite, the entire Google Classroom.
Yep.
Which is currently up and running
Yes.
and will be up and running next year, as long as we get the
As
funding.
long as we get the funding.
And then Brightspace.
Yes.
So I wonder how much of that is for Brightspace. In other words, how much does Brightspace cost by itself? And again, I
Yeah,
don't-
we'll get that for you. That specific.
And another question: if there is a need for an enhancement to an LMS such as Brightspace, I assume there would be cost involved with that, and I wonder what they would be. If we needed Brightspace, for instance, it's my understanding that some of our teachers have to input some data twice, and we were wondering if there was an adjustment to Brightspace so that would automatically, that wouldn't have to happen. I just wondered if that's possible and what the cost might be for
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Yeah, obviously we have a contractual commitment to our current
Yes.
LMS provider,
Yes.
and we will, as we look to move forward, we put all those, we get requirements to go in and to see what, again, to your point, Mr. Silkworth, what our teachers need in order to be successful to, again, reduce that workload and still get the information that students and parents and teachers need to be succuseful in classrooms in 2024. Right?
Right. And so in one of the questions that I saw, we have 1,120 Unit 1 employees on step 25.
Yep.
And I was curious that if I wanted to know how many of those employees that we had and what the cost might be if there were some kind of a bonus or whatever for them. And that data was provided. I think it was 1.2 million. I think it's important also to, was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more for our viewers out there about healthcare, to speak to the healthcare, where we are. We have the reputation as for having the best in the state. We want to maintain that for our staff and our employees. And so, could you give us a little bit more
Sure.
of an update on that?
Yep. So the Board of Education keeps a separate fund for healthcare to pay healthcare claims that is funded through multiple mechanisms, but the two main funding sources are Anne Arundel County Public Schools and employees and retirees through a premium split. Most of the splits are for active, and we'll just talk about active employees. 85% of the premium is paid by AACPS, 15% is paid by the employee. We are self-insured. I think that's important to know that, and that has been found to save money. Most large employers are self-insured. So what that means is we do not pay a vendor such as Care First to take on the risk of paying claims. Care First is just our administrator of the plan. So we contract with Care First for them to provide us their suite of healthcare options. But when any employee goes to the doctor, ultimately that bill comes to Anne Arundel County Public Schools and we pay it. And so we take the risk on that, both the positive and negative. And what we've seen over the last couple years is a big fluctuation in year-over-year claims growth. But what has specifically happened is last fiscal year, we saw a 12.8% increase in our claims, which has put a strain on the healthcare fund. We had a good, and this is why you have a good fund balance. We had $34 million in fund balance, which was near 2% or 2 months worth of claims paying ability. But given that rapid growth in claims, we had to dip into that balance by nearly $11 million. So we closed the year still with $23 million, which is healthy. But we're also this school year still seeing growth in claims. And so we can't continue to dip into our reserves. And so we're asking for this $17 million to help stabilize the fund to ensure that we're still able to pay those monthly bills and also keep a healthy fund balance for emergencies. I will say, this board in December passed a second quarter transfer that transferred $7 million into the healthcare fund in this fiscal year 24. And just a little foreshadowing, when we bring you our fourth quarter request, there will be an additional transfer into the healthcare fund proposed to this board as well, to also again help stabilize the fund. And so the goal here ultimately over a 2 to 3 year period is to get us back to where recurring revenue is equaling recurring expenses. But to your point, Mr. Silkworth, we offer great benefits both to our active employees and retirees. We are now covering nearly 30,000 lives. And so it's a over $200 million fund and growing. So it's a great benefit, and I think one that, as you've touted, and we continue to tout as we're out on the recruiting trail.
Thank you so much for that update. So I'm going to ask my colleagues if there are any other questions. We could have another round if need be. Okay, seeing no lights, and so once again, Dr. Waddell, would you like to say something? Okay. So once again, Mr. Stansky and everyone on the team, thank you so much. This presentation was just superb, and it really is helpful.
Point of personal privilege. The folks behind me are just absolute rock stars, and led by the individual to my left, Miss Camilla.
Who's that guy right there?
No, you can't put me on this spectacular team. I want to take that.
I want to
people here and here.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
They are they're the
rock
best.
stars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm
You
fortunate.
are too.
No, but they're the ones who make me look good. So
You're the director.
Yeah, look at them all. They in here late tonight. I'm so proud of y'all.
Oh,
Thank you
we
all.
are. Absolutely. So that does conclude our hearing this evening. I think there is one upcoming date. We have a budget hearing that will take place on January 25th at Old Mill High School. That's a 6 p.m. Budget hearing. If you happen to testify at the first budget hearing, you are not eligible to testify there. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Stay safe, stay warm.